presentation for Black History Month, where we will be talking about mass incarceration. I will begin with a quote by Camus Franklin, an activist and attorney from Atlanta. "Our criminal justice system isn't broken. This glaring racial inequality is actually a result of how the justice system was designed to work. A system with an undeniable historic connection to slavery that was outlawed a century and a half ago. Mass incarceration is a term used to describe the colossal increase in US prison population in the last 40 years. Many US citizens, as well as observers abroad, have been appalled by the detrimental and flagrant effects that mass incarceration has had on African Americans in particular. Mass incarceration is a result of systemic racism that disproportionately affects the African American community. Through the war on drugs in the past few decades, uneven policing, as well as racial bias, both explicit and implicit, Blacks are 5 times more likely to be incarcerated than whites, and people of color make up a huge proportion of those affected by mass incarceration. The loophole in the 13th Amendment additionally allows these inmates to be used in a modern construction of slavery. The 13th Amendment states, "Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, whereof the party shall be duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or a place subject to their jurisdiction." While chattel slavery, which is the owning of human persons and trading them as property, was abolished, the complete and total abolition of slavery was not. Prisons became the replacement for free Black labor, especially in the South, because slavery was not fully eradicated. This long-standing loophole was used in the era of Reconstruction, when Southern states would arrest Black people for petty crimes, misdemeanors, and false accusations through a system called convict leasing, where prisoners would be sold to private employers to work for free until they had served their sentence. This still occurs today, as convicts are leased to state corporations, as well as private corporations like Whole Foods, Target, and Revlon. This isn't said to scare you away or turn you away from big businesses, but maybe make you a smarter shopper, and also serves to show why Black History Month is so important. Black History Month is not only about acknowledging the accomplishments and prowess of Black people, but also about recognizing the oppressions that still stand in the way of equality and freedom. In the 21st century, one of the biggest obstacles facing African American citizens is the system of mass incarceration. The perennial legacy of slavery lingers at the fingertips of new policies that serve to perpetually discriminate against African Americans. In the words of Senegalese political activist Lamine Senghor, slavery is not abolished. On the contrary, it has been modernized.
Okay. Michelle Alexander is an author, Black woman, professor, and activist for civil rights, particularly pertaining to the Black community. Born and raised in Evanston, Illinois in 1967, she later attended Vanderbilt University and then received a Truman Scholarship and subsequently attended Stanford Law School. One of her most acclaimed works, Alexander wrote the book titled The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness, published in January of 2010. The book focuses on the impact of 4 presidential administrations regarding mass incarceration. Former presidents Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, Richard Nixon, and Ronald Reagan. Due to the controversial nature of the topic discussed in this book, Alexander spent 4 years making sure that all of her information and sources were in order, an investment of time and energy showing just how serious she was about the topic. As the book goes along, she determines each of their roles in the rise of mass incarceration. She also focused on the idea that the Jim Crow system never truly died, but rather took on a different form and a different name under mass incarceration. It is not only up to those who have an interest in civil rights advocacy to educate themselves on the history of mass incarceration in this country, but a responsibility for everyone to share. Knowing the history of your friends, family, and members of the world around you is your responsibility. Knowing your own history is your responsibility. As Dr. Salah Johnson, PhD, always says, as she always says, silence is consensus. And not actively taking the time to research the history of the nation you live in and how it affects others is complacency. Ignorance is attractive, but in the end is more work to maintain than knowledge. Reading works such as Alexander's is one of the first steps in breaking down big ideas like systematic oppression and getting a better understanding of how Black people have gotten to this point in time.
So I'll be going a little more into depth on the new Jim Crow. Many of us view the world of mass incarceration from a comfortable distance and sympathize with the plight of the so-called underclass. We also tend to interpret the experience of people living under the thumb of this system through the lens of popularized prejudices, meaning that we attribute the increase in incarceration rates in communities of color to the predictable yet unfortunate consequence of poverty, racial segregation, unequal education opportunities, and the presumed realities of the drug market, including the mistaken belief that most drug dealers are Black and brown. And as the book says, in fact, studies show that people of color use and sell drugs at similar rates than every other person with a skin color. And not only that, but the same studies show that white youth are more likely to engage in drug crime than people of color. Now this is the reality, but your mind wouldn't jump to that conclusion upon turning on the news or entering any of our nation's prisons and jails, which are overflowing with Black and brown people. As the United States celebrated its triumph over race with the election of Barack Obama, the majority of Black men in major urban areas are under correctional control or saddled with criminal records for life. Jim Crow laws were wiped off the books decades ago, but today an extraordinary percentage of the African American community is warehoused in prisons or trapped in a parallel social universe, denied basic civil and human rights, including the right to vote, the right to serve on juries, and the right to be free of legal discrimination in employment, housing, access to education, and public benefits. Today, it is no longer socially acceptable to use race to justify discrimination. However, as civil rights lawyer turned legal scholar Michelle Alexander demonstrates, it is perfectly legal to discriminate against convicted criminals in nearly all ways in which it was once legal to discriminate against African Americans. Once labeled a felon, even for a minor drug crime, the old forms of subjecting Black peoples to second-class citizenship are again legalized. The problem of mass incarceration has gotten so out of hand that in some communities, more than half of the adult Black men have been incarcerated at some point in their life. If current trends continue, then 1 in 3 Black men will be incarcerated in their lifetime. Even so, mass incarceration is characterized as a criminal justice issue and not as a racial justice issue or crisis. This book argues that mass incarceration is the most damaging manifestation of the backlash against the civil rights movement. Because when the CIA and FBI are ordered to plant drug dealers in urban neighborhoods after the war on drugs is announced, it's difficult not to see that mass incarceration is one of the leading problems America faces. Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to play a clip from the documentary 13, which is Academy Award nominated.
It's going to take time.
Up here. Okay.